Last talking points, we're going to look to the actual language of this amendment that it now 1:05. We have not seen, but we thought we'd see last night at 6 o'clock. I thank the chair and will yield the floor. And reserve the balance of the time and note the absence of a quorum.
Clerk, call the roll.
Mr. Alexander.
With the Senate in a quorum call, we'll show you now the portion of the Senate floor yesterday when Senators Hoeven and Corker proposed what is being called the Border Surge Amendment. It doubles the U.S. Border Patrol, adds 700 miles of border fence, and increases high-tech enforcement tools.
Madam President, I rise to speak on the issue of immigration reform. Thank you. I rise today to discuss an amendment that I will be introducing Senate Bill 744, the Comprehensive Immigration Reform legislation that this Senate body is carefully considering and debating. That amendment is the Hoeven-Corker Border Security Amendment. It's being finalized, and I plan to introduce it this afternoon along with the senator from the great state of Tennessee, Senator Bob Corker, was here with me, and I want to thank him for the tremendous work that he's done on this legislation. He's been absolutely inspirational to work with, a great leader, and somebody who is really working to do immigration reform the right way, to get a bipartisan solution that truly addresses the challenges that we face with immigration reform and to get it done the right way. In addition to Senator Corker and myself, other sponsors include Senator John McCain, Senator Lindsey Graham, Senator Marco Rubio, Senator Jeff Flake, Senator Kelly Ayotte, Senator Dean Heller, and others that are joining us on this legislation. I believe a number of them will be down here to provide their comments as well. I believe that the first order of business for immigration reform is to secure the border. I want to repeat that. I believe that the first order of business for immigration reform is to secure the border. Americans want immigration reform. Of that, there is no doubt. But they want us to get it right. And that means first and foremost securing the border. In 1986, President Reagan and the Congress granted legalized status to between 3 and 4 million illegal immigrants. The intent was to once and for all resolve the illegal immigration problem. But obviously it didn't. Here we are today with more than 11 million illegal immigrants in this country. And here we are today with a border that has still not been secured. Ironically, while illegal immigrants continue to come into our country because we've not secured the border, at the same time, our immigration laws do not meet the needs of our modern-day workforce for STEM-trained workers and other specialty and high-demand areas. In fact, one of the strengths of the underlying bill, the underlying legislation drafted by the Gang of Eight on a bipartisan basis, along with amendments that have already been added in committee, one of the strengths is that it includes provisions that will help us with our workforce needs. These provisions were adopted from legislation that myself and other senators sponsored, like legislation led by the esteemed senator from Texas, Senator John Cornyn, which would allow an increased number of college graduates, post-college degreed individuals, STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math trained individuals, and other highly skilled, highly trained people who could stay in this country, people we need to help grow our economy and to help create jobs. We also want people who can bring capital and job-creating opportunities to come to our country. And I believe the underlying bill has captured these concepts. The immigration innovation legislation that I was proud to co-sponsor with Senators Hatch and Klobuchar, Coons, and others is included in this bill. But we're not done. We're not done. We must do more to secure the border in this legislation. And that's exactly what we're offering here today. It is a very straightforward way to secure our border and to do so before allowing a pathway to legal permanent residency for those who came here illegally. Furthermore, it will ensure that we do not repeat the error we made before, failure to secure our border while at the same time fixing our immigration laws. It builds on what's already in the underlying bill, and it provides objective, verifiable standards and metrics to do so. Our legislation will provide significantly more resources to secure the border, more manpower, more fencing, more technology. And those resources must be fully deployed and operational before green card status is allowed. The legislation provides 5 specific conditions which must be met before anyone in RPI status, registered provisional immigrant status, can be adjusted or transitioned to LPR, lawful permanent resident status, green cards. These conditions are, first, we are including a comprehensive southern border security plan right in the legislation. This is a $3.2 billion high-tech plan. The plan is detailed, border sector by border sector, and it includes combinations of conventional security infrastructure like observation towers, fixed and mobile camera systems, helicopters, planes, and other physical surveillance equipment to secure the border. The plan also includes high-tech tools like mobile surveillance systems, seismic imaging, infrared ground sensors, and unmanned aerial systems equipped with infrared radar cameras, Vader radar, and long-range thermal imaging cameras. The Secretary of Homeland Security, together with the Secretary of Defense and the Comptroller General of the U.S., the GAO, must certify to the Congress that this comprehensive southern border security strategy is deployed and operational. That means in place and operating other than routine maintenance. That's the first requirement before the adjustment to LPR status. Second, DHS must deploy and maintain 20,000 additional Border Patrol agents on the southern border. That's in addition to the number of Border Patrol agents on the border now, which is right about 20,000 now. So we'll double the number of armed Border Patrol agents to detect and turn back those individuals who would try to cross our border illegally. Third, DHS must build 700 miles of fencing. That's double the amount required in the underlying bill, which calls for 350 miles of fencing. 700 miles of fencing, that compares to about 42 miles of fencing we have in place right now. Fourth, the Secretary of Homeland Security must verify that the mandatory E-Verify system has been implemented to enforce workplace laws so that illegal immigrants are not employed. And fifth, The electronic entry-exit identification system must be in place at all international airports and seaports in the United States where U.S. Customs and Border Protection officers are currently deployed. So these are the requirements. These are the requirements, and they must be met before lawful permanent residency is allowed. No green cards other than for Dreamers and blue card ag workers until these requirements are met. Once again, simply put, we must secure the border first. That's what Americans demand, and that's what we must do to get comprehensive immigration reform right. That's what this legislation does, and it does it with objective and verifiable methods. We ask our colleagues on both sides of the aisle to join with us and to pass this legislation. Thank you, Madam President, and at this point I would like to turn to my distinguished colleague from Tennessee, and again I want to thank him for his tremendous work, which is ongoing, but I just can't say how much I appreciate his good efforts and his good faith on a bipartisan basis. I turn for his comments, as well as then to enter into a colloquy with our colleagues who have worked so hard and played a real leadership role with this legislation. Senator Corker.
I want to thank the Senator from North Dakota for his outstanding leadership. You would expect that from someone who served in such a distinguished way as governor of his state. He's used to leading. He's done an outstanding job on this issue. I want to thank him for being a great partner. I know we still have some work to do. I mean, the fact is we still have to introduce this amendment, and work is underway right now. But I want to thank him, his staff, and all around him for the way that he has dug into this issue, solve the problems that I think Americans are looking for relative to security issues, and working with us in the way that you have. Thank you very much. And I want to thank the Gang of Eight for the work that they have done over the last multiple months to bring us to the place that we are, where we have an opportunity to do something that America needs, and that is to solve the immigration issue that we have, and to also ensure that in doing so, we've absolutely secured the border. One of my colleagues called this amendment, and again, it's being vetted right now. We hope to introduce it a little bit later today. There is a broad agreement about what the content of it is, and it is again being vetted and will be introduced later today. Some people have described this as a border surge. And the fact is that we are investing resources in securing our border that have never been invested before, a doubling, again, of the Border Patrol, $3.2 billion worth of the technology that we took from the Chief of the Border Patrol, the technology that he needs to have 100% awareness and to secure our border. Dealing with the exit program, dealing with E-Verify, so that all of these things are in place. I want to thank Senator Cornyn from Texas, who began the process of focusing on border security. I realize that his amendment earlier failed, but I think what he helped us do is build momentum towards an amendment that I consider to be far stronger and even better. But his efforts at looking at a border security measure, I think, helped us in this regard. So I want to say I'm not the kind of person who speaks for a long time. I think people understand that. I think the senator from North Dakota has done an outstanding job of laying out the many elements of this amendment that hopefully will be voted on in the very near future. But I do think the American people have asked us, if we pass an immigration bill off the Senate floor, to do everything that we can to ensure that we have secured the border. That's what people in Tennessee have asked for. That's what people in North Dakota have asked for. That's what people in Arizona have asked for. And, Madam President, I think that's what this amendment does. I think this amendment has the ability, if passed, to bring a bipartisan effort behind immigration reform that would then sit in the bill of the House. Look, I do wish that this amendment had some other measures relative to interior security. And I think that the House can improve this. I think a conference can improve this. And I hope that we have the opportunity down the road to see that occur. But I want to thank all involved in crafting an amendment that I think tries to deal with the sensibilities on both sides and at the same time secure our border in such a way that we can put this issue mostly behind us and we can have an immigration system in our country that meets the needs of a growing economy, the biggest economy in the world, that focuses on making our country stronger, not weaker, and hopefully will put this debate behind us. And so, Madam President, I yield the floor. Yes, sir.
Yield for a question.
Yes, sir.
First of all, could I say all of us who have had the honor of working with you and the senator from North Dakota are greatly appreciative of the work that you've done. If there is going to be a broad bipartisan support for the final product, it will be because of what you and the senator from North Dakota have done, and I'm very, very grateful for that. And I think that it's important, wouldn't you agree, that people understand that this is a very tough bill, and it required a lot of cooperation from our friends on the other side of the aisle to go along and agree with this. I think that they've shown a great deal of compromise in order to reach this point and agree with us on this legislation, which clearly we need bipartisan support for. But I'd like to ask the senator again for a couple of specifics, because I think it's important we understand how tough this legislation is. We know, isn't it true that already we know that E-Verify must be used by every employer in the country before anyone under this plan could be eligible for a green card. Isn't that true? It's already there.
That is correct.
And the electronic entry-exit system at all international air and seaports has to be up and operational before anyone is eligible for a green card. That's true.
That is correct.
Now, thanks to you and the senator from North Dakota, isn't it true that that additional technology must be deployed and operational in the field? And that includes the new Vader radar systems, integrated fixed towers, unmanned aerial system, fixed cameras, mobile surveillance system, ground sensors, to the point where, isn't it true that the head of the Border Patrol has assured us that if these technologies are in place and operational, that we can have 100% situational awareness and 90% effective control of the border? I would ask my colleague.
That is correct. That is correct.
So, in order to finally put the final piece of this puzzle together, isn't it true that you and the senator from North Dakota have called for 350 miles of additional border fencing in addition to the 350 miles that's already there, and 20,000 new full-time Border Patrol agents are hired and deployed before someone is eligible for a green card? Is that a fact?
That is correct. That is correct. I don't know of anybody that has proposed a tougher measure, when you look at it all combined, than the measure that hopefully will be on the floor in the very near future.
I wonder if the senator from North Dakota would like to respond to that.
Well, I appreciate the esteemed senator from Arizona again emphasizing these points. That's what this is all about. This is about securing the border. All of the things you just identified are in the bill. They're requirements. The plan itself, this $3.2 billion comprehensive southern border strategic plan, is detailed border sector by border sector. And again, this puts everybody in the same place, saying we're going to secure the border first, because there's no green cards until we secure the border.
Isn't it true, I'd say to my two colleagues, and Madam President, I ask unanimous consent to engage in colloquy with both the senator from Tennessee and the senator from North Dakota.
Without objection.
Isn't it true, I say to my friends, that on our side of the aisle there is understandable skepticism and well-founded skepticism on the part of my friend from Texas, because we've seen this movie before. In 1986, we gave amnesty to 3 million people, and we said we would secure the borders. Then in 2006, we passed border security appropriations, and there was going to be plenty of money, and it was never funded. So for those of us in the Southwest particularly, but people all over America, isn't it true that there's understandable skepticism that we would not pass legislation which is binding? And isn't it true that you can't make this, as far as Border Patrol and as far as miles of fencing, any more binding than it is in your amendment?
Absolutely.
I would like to add that it's not just all these things that we're putting on the border and that we are requiring that these things are in place and certified and operating before you go to green card status, but also it's about eliminating the incentive to try to get across the border. When we put E-Verify in place and we have a proper guest worker program, you take away the incentive to try to get across the border. So we secure the border, but we also take away the incentive to come across, because you can come across legally through the guest worker program, and if you come across illegally, we're going to find you and you can't get a job. So it's both. That's what we mean when we talk about comprehensive border security and a comprehensive approach.
I'd ask my colleagues one more question. With all due respect to every member of this body, when you look at this legislation and you look at these triggers and you look at the technology that's going to be required, which, if operational, the head of the Border Patrol has said will give 100% awareness and 90% effective control, plus this increasing in fencing, plus Border Patrol agents, and the already existing in legislation, E-Verify. And I think the senator from North Dakota is very correct. You remove the incentive for people, if they know that they can't get a job in this country unless they have the proper documents, then people will stop coming illegally. And it also addresses the issue of the 40% who are here who never crossed our border illegally but came on a visa and overstayed it. I just would ask for maybe a subjective opinion. Is it possible that you could ever argue against this legislation now by saying that it does not give us a secure border?
I think it would be very difficult, and I thank the senator from Arizona for raising these issues. If the issue that one has is securing the border with this immigration bill, if this amendment passes, which I hope that it will, I don't know how anybody could argue that the reason they're not supporting this legislation is because we haven't addressed securing the border. We have addressed that. We've addressed that in spades in this legislation. Again, I want to thank the senator from North Dakota for his leadership on this issue and the other side of the aisle for working with us. But I don't think that anyone who votes against this bill could argue that the reason, if we pass this amendment, we need to get it to the floor. We're still working out some issues, and hopefully we'll be done in a few hours. But I don't know how you could argue that we haven't dealt with the issue that many people have been concerned about, many people in Tennessee, and that is we have, if this legislation passes in the form that it is, with this amendment as we've agreed, we have secured the border.
Madam President, Madam President,
could I just finish answering this question? I say to my colleague, I asked Senator from North Dakota.
I would respond to the good senator from Arizona and say, look, all of the ideas that have been brought forward to secure the border, we have worked to include in this package. I mean, we have tried on a bipartisan way to listen to everybody and say, what can we do? What can we put on the border to secure the border? We've tried to bring all those resources to bear. And to the good senator from Arizona, I would say we want to bring in our senator from Florida, who's worked so hard along with you on this issue to provide truly the right kind of leadership for comprehensive reform on a bipartisan basis. And I also want to reach out to the good senator from Texas. A lot of the ideas in this bill came from legislation he put forward. Look, this is about all of us putting our ideas into securing this border. We have tried to include everybody's ideas in this effort. That's exactly
the senator yield for a question.
And I would yield to the senator from Texas.
I'd thank the senator. I honestly respect and value the work that the so-called Gang of Eight has done on this legislation, as well as the contributions made by my colleague from North Dakota and from Tennessee. I think they have moved this bill in a constructive direction to give people more confidence that we're actually serious about dealing with border security. But I want to ask them to distinguish, if they will, between the provision that they, I know, supported, both of them, in my amendment that was tabled earlier, which makes the progress from probationary status to green card contingent upon 100% situational awareness of the border and a 90% apprehension rate, which is defined as operational control. How does your amendment differ from that? My understanding, just from, and I know it hasn't been written yet or hasn't been completed yet, but my understanding is that Senator Schumer and the Democrats would not agree to that. I know they object to it. Senator Schumer's been quite clear in his telling me that. But I would just, my impression is that this is a promise of future performance, and there is no contingency in the same sense that there was a trigger that prohibited the transition from probationary status to legal permanent residency. Could the Senator please
Yeah, Mr. President, if I may
clarify
respond to that. I appreciate very much the question from the Senator from the great state of Texas, and I thank him for the work he did and the work we did together, and the fact that we absolutely tried here to build on concepts that you put forward. So it's not the same, but we tried to build on those concepts. In terms of the actual border security plan, the comprehensive southern border security strategy, the $3.2 billion plan that includes technology, helicopters, planes, all these different things that I detailed, that is exactly what you were talking about in your legislation. So physically, we do deploy all the things that you'd laid out in your legislation, and then we add to it 20,000 agents and an additional 350 miles of fence on top of the 350 miles of fence called for in the underlying bill. So we put all of the physical resources out there, and then we add all the fencing and all the manpower to make sure we accomplish exactly what you were laying out. And in terms of the trigger, all those things are triggers before going to a green card. So it's different in that the discussion was, how do we set up verifiable metrics? And that's what we're doing by clearly delineating all these things we're putting in, okay? And then we actually add to what you had in the legislation.
Would the Senator yield for one last question?
I don't know who has the floor.
Just for one last question.
I would.
Because I know there are others who want to talk, and it's not my intention to interfere with their colloquy here. But the 20,000 additional Border Patrol, here's an area where the movement has been pretty dramatic, Mr. President, because we started with 0 additional Border Patrol. My amendment was disparaged by the distinguished senior senator from Arizona and the distinguished senior senator from New York as being a budget buster. 5,000 Border Patrol. I was told we don't need more boots, we need technology. Now, I find, to my shock and amazement, the distinguished senior senator from Arizona say we need 20,000 more Border Patrol. How much is it going to cost? That's the question.
And if I may respond to that, again, that makes my point. To the senator from Texas, I want to thank him for his work. That's a great example of how we built on the foundation you laid. That's a great example. You asked for, what was it, 5,000 Border Patrol agents, and we got 20,000. So this is a great example, and it is all paid for because, remember, now this is important.
And I would repeat my question, how much is it going to cost?
I will absolutely go to that. That's where I'm going right now. Remember, in the CBO score, in the first 10 years, $197 billion. So we use about $30 billion to darn sure make that border is secure. But overall, this bill, with this amendment, creates border security and more than pays for itself. And here's the other point. Remember, in that CBO score, it showed $197 billion in terms of revenue creation. So we used $30 billion of that to add the border agents and secure the border. But here's the other thing we've got to look at in that CBO score. It said that with the underlying bill, without our amendment, with the underlying bill, we would have 7 million more illegal immigrants in this country in 10 years. Without the bill, we'd have 10 million more. So what does that say? It didn't get the job done on border security, and that is exactly why we're adding this amendment, and it will get the job done.
Senator from Arizona. My appreciation to the distinguished senators for their answer to the question. Thank you.
I thank the senator from Texas for all his engagement. Mr. President, as usual, the senator from South Carolina has a very busy schedule, so I would ask unanimous consent that he be allowed 10 minutes, and then I regain the floor. I ask unanimous consent for that.
The senator from South Carolina.
I can do this.
Is there objection?
Is my request agreed to?
Mr. President.
Is there objection?
Okay.
Without objection.
Thank you all to make this better. To Senator Cornyn's question about cost. I never objected to more Border Patrol agents. I didn't know how we would pay for the bill. I hoped it would be deficit neutral. Boy, did my hopes come true. It's not deficit neutral. According to the Congressional Budget Office, we reduced the deficit in the first 10 years by $190 billion, and over a 20-year period, $700 billion. So the reason I didn't want to agree to 5,000 agents without somebody showing me how we pay for it, we're borrowing enough money from our grandchildren and great-grandchildren to run the government. We don't need to do any more borrowing unless we absolutely have to. The good news is the bill that we've written will create economic growth in the country at a time when we need economic growth. It will allow employers access to labor they don't have today, so they won't be tempted to cheat in the future. This bill helps the economy. Don't take my word for it. Take CBO's word for it. If you had some more money to spend in this bill, how would you want to spend it? Let me tell you what Senator Graham would like to do. He would like to hire 20,000 Border Patrol agents to let everybody in the country know, I get it when you say we got to secure the border. You're right. We've had 2 waves of illegal immigration. We don't need a third. And why are we doing this? Why 20,000 Border Patrol agents? That's 3 brigades of troops. That's taking 3 brigades equivalent of Army troops, trained law enforcement officers, to supplement the 20,000 we've got. You'll have a Border Patrol agent every 1,000 feet on the border, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It costs over $20 billion, but I can tell you this, it's money well spent because it makes the border more secure, which helps us with our sovereignty. Why are we hiring 20,000 agents on top of the 20,000 we got? Because our country can't control who comes in. We cannot maintain our sovereignty if every 10 and 20 years 3 to 11 million illegal immigrants come into our country. And if you want the border secured like I do, your ship has come in. The 20,000 Border Patrol agents are now affordable and they're needed. The 700-mile fence will be built because it's needed. The $3.2 billion of technology that has been proven to work in Iraq and Afghanistan will go to the border because it will help back up the Border Patrol agents. As to my good friend from Texas, how do we know all this works? The bill requires us to hire the agents and put them on the border before you can transition to green card. It's not talking about hiring the agents. It's not talking about training them. You got to hire and deploy. The bill also says the fence has to be built. The bill says the $3.2 billion of new technology that worked in Iraq and Afghanistan has to be bought, purchased, deployed, and operational. Here's my belief. If you hire the Border Patrol agents and you put them on the border, they're not going to read a comic book. They're going to do their job. You don't need to prove to me they're going to do their job. You just need to get them on the border so they can do their job. And if you have the 18 drones versus the 6, you don't need to prove to me somebody will fly them. They'll fly them. And if you have the technology deployed and operational, in addition to the drones, the Vader radar and the sensors, people will look at the radar because they want to protect our country. What's been missing is capacity. This is a border surge. We have militarized our border almost. Why? Because we've lost our sovereignty. We've lost the ability to control who comes into America. So my belief is that if you can't get a green card till all this is bought, purchased, deployed, that's enough. There will come a point to where it's enough. Ladies and gentlemen, I've been working on this for almost a decade with Senator McCain. I can look anybody in the eye and tell them that if you put 20,000 Border Patrol agents on the border in addition to 20,000 we've got, that's 1 every 1,000 feet. That will work. And if you buy technology that helped us fight and create success in Iraq when we did the surge, that will help the Border Patrol agents. And if you build a fence, that all helps. So I don't need any more than just getting it in place. And finally, to my good friends from Tennessee, my good friend from North Dakota, the bill, when we wrote it, I thought was good, but you've made it a lot better.
And to anybody in America who believes border security should be robust and it is a national security priority, we have, in every sense of the term reasonable, met that goal. We couldn't have done it without more people. To the Gang of 8 members, it's been a joy to work on this bill. To our colleagues who have weighed in and tried to get the bill better and get the yes, you're doing this country a great service. So I hope that Monday night we will pass legislation that will mandate that 20,000 additional Border Patrol agents will be on the border working before you can get a green card, that the technology that worked in Afghanistan and Iraq will be up and operational before you can get a green card, the fence will be built before you get a green card, and to me, ladies and gentlemen, that's enough. That is enough. The people that we're talking about deserve a hard-earned process to get into America. They need to pay a fine, learn our language, get in the back of the line. They need to earn their way into good standing, but they are people. So I am very pleased to support what I think is the most dramatic amendment in the history of our country to secure our border at a time when we need it secured. Thank you very much to all.
Mr. President.
Senator from Arizona.
Thank you. Under the previous order.
What is the order, if I might ask? Who's control? Is someone controlling?
The order was to recognize the senator from Arizona after the senator from South Carolina.
Right.
All the Republicans.
Right.
I thank my friend from South Carolina with his usual eloquent exposition of what this situation is all about. I have other colleagues who are waiting to speak, but I just want to say again, the senator from North Dakota and the senator from Tennessee have shown the best of what this institution can be all about. Not only did they reach agreement between the two of them, not only did they reach agreement with, I believe, a significant number of our colleagues, but they also reached agreement with my colleagues on the other side of the aisle. That's, in this day and age, that's a signal success, and I thank them for not only what they've produced, but the many compromises that they had to make along the way. I won't try to embellish what the senator from South Carolina said, except to say that, Mr. President, I come from a state that has probably been torn apart more than any other state by this issue. We passed legislation in reaction to our broken borders, where ranchers in the southern part of my state were actually murdered, where our wildlife refuges were destroyed, where people died in the desert by the hundreds. Their bodies were found months later, where coyotes bring people across the border and then hold them in drop houses in Phoenix and hold them for ransom under the most unspeakable conditions, where drugs are brought freely across the border and guided by guides on mountaintops, guiding these drug cartels as they bring the drugs to Phoenix. And the drug people will tell you Phoenix, Arizona is still the major drug distribution center in the United States of America. So I take a back seat to no one, even from the great state of Texas, of the enormous challenges and controversies associated with illegal immigration. We tried before, and we failed. We tried before, and we failed. And I won't go into why we failed and all the people who are responsible. I'll take responsibility. I didn't do a good enough job in selling my colleagues on the absolute need for immigration reform. The fact are that 11 million people live in the shadows, and they live here in de facto amnesty, and by God, they are being exploited every single day. Shouldn't it be a nation founded on Judeo-Christian principles to bring these people out of the shadows? Yes, punish them because they committed crimes by crossing our border illegally. But isn't it in our nation to come together and pass this legislation and not manufacture reasons for not doing that? Isn't there enough of a penalty? Isn't there enough border security now, thanks to my colleagues from North Dakota and from Tennessee? Isn't there enough now? So all I can say is I urge my colleagues to vote overwhelmingly in favor of this hard-fought, well-crafted amendment, and let's move on to other issues that face this nation. And I believe that we can look back years from now and say to our children and our grandchildren that we did the right thing. Mr. President, I yield the floor.
The senator from New York.
Mr. President, I understand that both my colleagues from New Hampshire and Florida wish to speak, so I would be happy to have each of them speak for 5 minutes and then me speak for 5 minutes, if that's okay.
Is there objection?
I ask unanimous consent, 5, 5, and 5, okay?
Hearing no objection, senator from New Hampshire.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to thank my colleague from New York for giving us that courtesy. I rise in support of the amendment that will be offered by my colleagues from Tennessee and North Dakota. I appreciate the hard work that they have done to enhance the border security provisions in the current pending immigration bill on the floor. To all of us, securing our border is very, very important to preventing another wave of illegal immigration in this country. But what they have done is incredibly important. It's very, very strong, strongest measures that I think this body has considered. 20,000 Border Patrol agents, essentially doubling those agents that will be along the southern border. In addition to that, really significantly increasing the fencing. In fact, at least 700 miles of fencing will have to be completed along the southern border, almost doubling what was already in the bill for fencing, specifying what types of technology that the Department of Homeland Security will have to deploy, including the best technology using sensors and drones to make sure that we can apprehend those who are illegally trying to cross our border, and very much making sure that we prevent a further wave of illegal immigration, along with the strong reforms in this bill to our legal immigration system of making sure that we can keep the best and the brightest here to help us grow our economy, to make sure that we have the workforce we need to ensure that we will create jobs here. Let us not forget that we are a country of immigrants, that I dare say that most of my colleagues here that either their parents or their grandparents came from another country and worked very, very hard in this country. And so we need a legal immigration that works for our country, that makes sure that our economy continues to grow and that we have people here who want to work hard and live the American dream. But we also cannot ignore securing our southern border, and that's why I'm proud to co-sponsor the amendment that will be offered by Senator Corker, Senator Hoeven. This doubles the amount of border agents, doubles the amount of fencing, specifies the type of technology that is required, and gives the resources to finally secure our border. To my Republican colleagues, I think there was an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal today that's worth mentioning. I share their concerns about securing the border, but I hope with the strong enhancements that have been put in this amendment to double the amount of border security, to strengthen and double almost the amount of fencing, to make sure that the right technology is in place to secure our border, this will prevent another wave of illegal immigration, that they will not use border security as a ruse not to vote for a bill to fix an immigration system that is absolutely broken. The status quo isn't working for anyone, and none of us want to find ourselves here another 5 years from now debating this issue again and finding that we have a larger population of illegal immigration and we have a legal immigration that isn't working for our country and isn't making sure that we have the right people here, people who are working hard, living the American dream to grow our economy and create American jobs here. So, I think today the Wall Street Journal had said that this border security issue cannot be used as a trick not to want to support a strong bill which is on the floor with this amendment will make it very strong on the border security provisions and finally work in a bipartisan manner to fix a broken immigration system that is not working for anyone and not working for our country. So I thank you, Mr. President, and I will turn this over to my colleague from Florida, who I want to commend my colleague from Florida who has worked along with the other members of the group, the senators from Arizona as well as the senator from South Carolina, but the senator from Florida, I know how focused he is on making sure that our borders are secure. I appreciate his strong leadership in fixing this broken immigration system and making sure that we do not have another wave of illegal immigration in this country. And with that, I'll turn it over to the senator from Florida.
Mr. President. The senator from Florida.
Parliamentary inquiry.
Senator will state his inquiry.
My inquiry is that it's my understanding that we are getting equal time back and forth, and as my question is this based on parties, so that Democrats and then Republicans will alternate in their time? Is that correct?
We have no agreement for alternating.
There's no agreement, so that those, because all I've heard in the last hour is those who are in support of the bill. My question would be, when can someone be heard who is not in support of the bill?
The time was equally divided between majority and minority, not between proponents and opponents.
I see. All right. There you go.
Is that inquiry, was that by unanimous consent?
It was.
Well, that explains it then.
The senator from Florida.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I appreciate this opportunity, and I'll be brief. My colleagues have already stated what this entails and the details of it, and I don't think that's important. I got involved in this issue earlier this year after spending the better part of my first 2 years in the Senate thinking about this issue because, quite frankly, not just being from Florida, but living in South Florida, I'm surrounded by the reality of it every single day. When I started this effort, I became deeply convinced that this is something that needed to be fixed and needed to be dealt with. But from the very beginning, from the very early days of my involvement, I made clear that border security was an essential component of it. And I want to clarify why. This is not against anybody. Border security is not an anti-anyone effort. That's not what it is. We understand that America is a special country. It's so special that people want to come here from all over the world, and they do. 1 million people a year come here legally every single year. We also understand that it's so special and unique that some people are willing to risk their lives to come here illegally. And as compassionate people, we understand that reality, and our heart breaks at the stories of what people have to go through to come here. But we also understand that the United States of America is a sovereign country. And every single sovereign country on the planet, every single one, tries to or does control its borders and who comes into the country and who leaves. Every country in the world does that. And the United States of America should not be any different. And so that's what this issue at the end of the day is about, is that we have a sovereign right to protect our border. And we have a crisis on the southern border of the United States. For many different reasons, people have chosen to cross that border illegally, consistently, for the last 20 or 30 years, and the results are evident to all of us. So that is why border security is such an important part of this bill and of this measure. Now, when we introduced our bill, the bill said that basically the Department of Homeland Security would be given some money and that they would get to decide what the border security plan looked like. Many people in the public and many of our colleagues were unhappy with that proposal. They raised valid concerns that we were turning over border security and deciding what the plan would be to people that claim it's already secure. And so what this amendment does is it takes that back, and it says that we instead, we here in the Senate, will decide what that plan is after we get input from border agents and others about what will work. And what this amendment reflects is what we know will work. We know that adding border agents, doubling the size of the U.S. Border Patrol, that will work. We know that completing the fence work, that will work. We know that an entry-exit tracking system, since 40% of our illegal immigrants are those who overstay visas, we know that will work. We know that E-Verify will work. It's something that many of my colleagues in my party have asked for the better part of 10 years will work, because it takes away the magnet of employment. And we know that these new technologies that weren't available to us in 1986 or in 2006 or even 5 years ago, we know that will work. And what this bill says is you must do all of those things, and it is linked to legal permanent residence. In essence, someone who has violated our immigration laws cannot become a legal permanent resident in the United States until all 5 of those things happen. That's the guarantee that this will happen. Now, let me close by saying I understand the frustration. I really do. I know that these promises have been made in the past. In a moment, the senator from Alabama, whose position on this is well stated, will point out that these promises were also made in 1986. By the way, in 1986, I was 15 years old, and I got to tell you, immigration was the last thing on my mind at that time. But here's the reality of it. The choice is, before us, is to try to fix this or to leave it the way it is. And what we have today is a disaster of epic proportions. 10 or 11 million human beings living among us. We don't know who they are. They're working but not paying taxes. There are criminals among them. That has to be solved. A legal immigration system built on the 19th century? We need to fix this. And this is our chance to fix it. Thank you, Mr. President.
The senator from New York.
We'll continue. Mr. President, thank you. And first, I want to thank my colleagues, first, Tennessee, for the good work they have done, my Gang of 4 colleagues, my Gang of 8 colleagues, the 7 of the Gang of 8 colleagues who are my colleagues. We are working real hard to get a bill done, and it is not easy. It's one of the hardest things I've ever done as a legislator, but we'll keep making progress and we'll keep improving, and today I think is a breakthrough day. Let me go over it. First, speaking on behalf of the Democratic members of my bipartisan group, let's say this. There's still some drafting of the legislative language to be completed. We're continuing to inform all our allies on our side about the contours of the proposal. But barring something unexpected, we're extremely enthusiastic that a bipartisan agreement is at hand. I know there have been a number of news reports this morning. It is accurate. We are on the verge of a huge breakthrough on
objection.
Mr. President.
Senator from Vermont.
Mr. President, I understand the Leahy Amendment number 1183 is now pending. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Mr. President, I modified my amendment with the changes that I have at the desk.
The senator has that right. The amendment is so modified.
President, I yield the floor.
I have a second-degree amendment, Mr. President, which is at the desk.
The clerk will report.
The senator from Nevada, Mr. Reed, proposes an amendment numbered 1551 to amendment number 1183 as modified.
I have an amendment to the underlying bill at the desk.
The clerk will report.
Okay, Mr. President, let's see here. Second-degree amendment, you've taken care of that, is that right? It's filed.
Yes, sir.
Cloture motion to the desk with respect to the amendment, that's also at the desk, is that right?
It is. The clerk will report the cloture motion.
Cloture motion. We, the undersigned senators, in accordance with the provisions of Rule 22 of the Standing Rules of the Senate, hereby move to bring to a close the debate on the Leahy Amendment numbered 1183 as modified to S-744, a bill to provide for comprehensive immigration reform and for other purposes, signed by 17 senators as follows. Reed of Nevada, Leahy,
I ask
Bennett.
unanimous consent that reading the names be waived, Mr. President.
Without objection.
I now ask for the yeas and nays on my amendment.
Is there a sufficient second?
Mr. President, in the rush of things here, I'm getting ahead of myself. There's an amendment to the underlying bill which is at the desk.
The clerk will report.
The senator from Nevada, Mr. Reed, proposes an amendment numbered 1552 to the language proposed to be stricken by the reported committee substitute amendment to S-744.
And on that, I ask for the yeas and nays.
Is there a sufficient second? It appears that there is.
I have a second-degree amendment that I would ask.
The yeas and nays are ordered.
Thanks. Thank you, Mr. President. I have a second-degree amendment to the desk.
The clerk will report.
The senator from Nevada, Mr. Reed, proposes an amendment numbered 1553 to amendment numbered 1552.
I have a motion to recommit the bill with instructions.
The clerk will report the motion.
The senator from Nevada, Mr. Reed, moves to recommit the bill to the Committee on the Judiciary with instructions to report back forthwith with an amendment numbered 1554.
I ask for the yeas and nays on my motion.
Is there a sufficient second? There appears to be. The yeas and nays are ordered.
I have an amendment to the instructions that it's been filed.
The clerk will report.
The senator from Nevada, Mr. Reed, proposes an amendment numbered 1555 to the instructions of the motion to recommit.
I ask for the yeas and nays on that amendment.
Is there a sufficient second? It appears there is. The yeas and nays are ordered.
I have a second-degree amendment at the desk.
The clerk will report.
The senator from Nevada, Mr. Reed, proposes an amendment numbered 1556 to amendment numbered 1555.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that the mandatory quorum required under Rule 22 be waived and that the vote on the motion to vote cloture on the Leahy Amendment as modified occur at 5:30 p.m. Monday, June 24th.
Is there objection? Without objection, so ordered.
Mr. President, first of all, I commend the chairman of the Judiciary Committee, Senator Leahy, for his modified amendment. Senator Leahy has moved this bill from the beginning, and certainly we all look with pride at what was done in the Judiciary Committee in marking up this bill. And he was here last night late on the floor. He's a proud son of Vermont, and rightfully so. Mr. President, I thank profusely the chairman of the Subcommittee on Immigration, Senator Charles Schumer, who has been the quarterback, the leader of the Gang of Eight. Gang of Eight, under his direction, negotiated the basis for this bill, and it's now the pending Leahy Amendment. This amendment will put to rest any remaining credible concerns about the border, about border security. As Senator McCain said yesterday, and I quote, "If they can't accept these provisions, then border security is not their problem," close quote. I thank all the members of the Gang of Eight, Schumer, Durbin, Menendez, Bennett, McCain, Graham, Rubio, and Flake. And I think it really speaks volumes, Mr. President, that Lindsey Graham stepped out, even though he has a re-election effort that faces it. It was an act of courage, as it was with all senators, but especially I want to focus attention on him as I have just done. I thank Senators Corker and Hoeven for their yeoman's work, working with the Gang of Eight to come up with the product that we have. The product that we have now is the work of the Gang of Eight and the Gang of Two with their friends. I've always been impressed with Bob Corker. I told him about that earlier today. Since he stepped foot in this body, he's wanted to legislate. And for a lot of reasons, he hasn't been able to do that. But here is legislation at its best. He was mayor of the city. As a result of that, he understands on any level of government, compromise is the way we get things done. I always refer to Senator Hoeven as Governor Hoeven. I think it's remarkable that he's here with the background that he has. He, too, understands how important it is to work to get things done. His experience is more than just being part of a legislature. It's working with a legislative body. So I admire the work that both these fine men have done. But for them, we couldn't have gotten this done. Now, Mr. President, these senators have charted a path to a broad bipartisan vote on this measure. They've followed the model that we have done too infrequently in this body: violence against women, marketplace fairness, farm bill. But next week we're going to add immigration as another example of how to get things done. And I hope it portends well for the future of this august body that we all so love but have been disappointed in recent years. But even with this broad bipartisan support, these broad bipartisan majorities that we have in this package that is a wonderful product, there are still a few who continue to take the no prisoners opposition to any cooperation. We worked late in the night last night on a potentially unanimous consent agreement to allow for processing amendments. I've got senators over here who want to offer amendments. They have ideas how to improve this bill. We've heard from some of the Republicans that they also want to offer amendments. We should be able to do that, Mr. President. Now, as I've indicated to the two Republican senators, Corker and Hoeven, there's still an opportunity to do that. We're going to continue to try to work before we finish this legislation to allow people to offer amendments. Now, frankly, Mr. President, most of them won't pass, but that's not the point. They should be able to offer an amendment. And I hope we can come up with a list of amendments to move forward with this body. We're going to move forward with the legislation regardless, but it would be nice if people who are elected to this body have the opportunity to offer some amendments. So we're going to continue to work on that. But we haven't been able to overcome the objections of a small minority of senators. The opposition of this small group is not going to stop this bill from moving forward. And that's why I've taken steps this morning to set in motion a process to bring this measure to finality within the next week. So the Senate will vote Monday evening on the motion to vote cloture on the Leahy Border Security Amendment. We will continue to work to get a unanimous consent agreement to help process legislation. But barring any further agreement, the Senate will vote on cloture on the committee substitute early Wednesday and cloture on the bill on Thursday. We'll finish the bill, I repeat, before recess. Now, Mr. President, in the annals of history, and there's been a lot of stuff go through this body over the 230-plus years we've been a country. But when those history books are written, this legislation we're going to pass in this body in 1 week is historic. What we have done here is good for our country in so many different ways. As the Congressional Budget Office demonstrated a couple of days ago, it'll be the largest boost to our economy that we've seen in a long, long time. Up to almost $1 trillion, Mr. President, to reduce the debt. And in the process, we're going to increase the security of this great nation. Now, Mr. President, I've indicated that Chuck Schumer is the subcommittee chair. Who did he replace? Ted Kennedy. Ted Kennedy tried so hard to get something. I mean, he was chairman of this subcommittee for decades. So Ted Kennedy, I'm sure, is going to wait till next Friday, but he's going to smile at all of us, because this is a remarkably good piece of work, something that he tried to do for a long time. This country, Mr. President, is a nation of immigrants. Now, I know everybody's in a hurry, but I have to say just a couple more things. My wonderful wife is here in America today because her father came here from Russia. He and his people were persecuted. He came here. He came here as Israel Goldfarb. That was his name. He, like a lot of immigrants, changed his name. I only knew him as Earl Gold. But, Mr. President, I don't know what he accomplished in his short life here. He died as a young man. But one thing he did accomplish, he fathered my wife, my wonderful wife, an only child. And as a result of that, I have 5 wonderful children, 16 grandchildren. That's what immigration is all about. That's why this country of ours has found immigration as a source of vitality, not a burden. This is what has been part of America's genius, different than any other country. That's our destiny. I'm very proud of this body.
President.